Hello and welcome to a special North Texas edition of TTP at Home, where Fran and I are sick and tired of the lies attacking our endorsed candidates for the runoff election. And so we thought we would bring you some special interviews to help you have the information you need to make an educated vote.
Okay, so we're going to be doing this today in sort of a speed dating format. We're going to run candidates in and out of here and interview them with just a few questions. We want to get just down to the down and dirty and the truth of what's happening in these races. And we're going to start today with Jace Yarbrough. He is running for Senate in Senate District 30. He's running in an open seat, and it's putting the elected class, even some that we tend to like, against the grassroots. So, Jace, first of all, tell us, how did the primary go and where did we end up?
Yeah, our finish in the primary was incredibly strong. We outstripped everyone's expectation. We were outspent 3.5 to 1, had every big name, not just in Texas politics, but even national politics against us. We got in on the last day to file, meaning we were also at a time disadvantage, and came in with 34 points to my opponent's 36. Incredibly strong finish and a testament to a lot of the good people around the district that share our values and want to see the senator from Senate District 30 represent their very, very conservative convictions down in Austin.
So I know we want to do this as fast as possible and just get these interviews, out there so people can watch them. But why don't you just very quickly address why you got in the race so late? Because I know that's been a little bit controversial.
Sure. So I've felt a vocational call to politics as a Christian my whole adult life. I've served as a precinct chair for the party and try to stay up and involved and informed. And as folks who are familiar with my background know, am involved in a number of sort of hot button cultural issues, whether in my professional work as an attorney or my service in the military. I'd always thought that God would open a door and I would run for office at some point. This seat came available very, very late. The incumbent announced on November the 7th that he was not going to seek re-election, to the surprise of many. There was a bit of a scramble at that point. Some big names, Pat Fallon and others, were thought to maybe they're going to run for the seat. By the time all that settled out and many of those gentlemen decided they weren't, we were about a week and a half from filing deadline. And so my opponent was perceived as the person who would probably win this seat if nobody else got in. He has an incredibly, just a terrible record as the chairman of our county GOP. There's so many grassroots folks in the district that are absolutely set against him. And so at the prompting and, after consideration and prayer, we decided, okay, well, if nobody else is going to do this, then we'll step up and run. And I think part of the thing that scared a lot of people off was some of the big names who got in behind my opponent fairly quickly after he announced.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know we, as True Texas Project, supported you, but there was another gal in the race that a lot of the grassroots also supported. Why would you think that they should now join your effort as opposed to Hagenbush?
Sure.
Is it Hagenbush?
We can go with that. Sure.
Whatever. We don't like him anyway.
If the folks who supported my opponent who you mentioned, who didn't make the race, if they believe the values they say they believe, if you're for medical freedom, if you're pro-life, for religious liberty, if you want someone who is going to go down to Austin and stand even when it's difficult, even when the powerful politicians come and say, you need to do X, you need to do Y, even though that contradicts what the people in your Senate district want, and they want somebody who will stand up and say no, then I'm absolutely your candidate. And I have always done everything I can to maintain open relationships with the folks who supported my former opponent. And I'm open with them. Hey, give me a call. And I'm proud to say a number of people who have endorsed her have now come to endorse me, from SREC members to local precinct chairs. So that support's growing, and I'm dedicated to earning it. I want to be the voice for grassroots conservatives in our district, regardless of who you support in the primary.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit then about your opponent, because it is a very unique scenario, right, Fran? Where
it totally is. There's lots of controversy on whether or not he's even eligible to run for this position. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my opponent has lived in and currently lives in Senate District 12. He's got $1 million lakefront property there. That's Senator Tan Parker's district. Mm-hmm. He claims that Well, first let me say, in order to be eligible to run for this seat under the Texas Constitution, you have to have lived in our Senate district as of November the 5th, 2023. Senator Springer did not announce that he was not seeking re-election until 2 days after that. So quickly thereafter, it appears that my opponent started to try and fabricate residency in our district. The primary way that he has done that is by claiming that he lives on the third floor of a commercial office complex that his business rents. Under Denton City Code, if you were to live in that office building, it would be a Class C misdemeanor and a $2,000 fine every day that you live there. He's been inconsistent on his story. He kind of can't keep the lies straight, is the way that I phrase it. If you go, you can look at some of his testimony. NBC recently interviewed him. We were interviewed prior to that by Jack Fink, and the sort of narrative as to whether he lives in an apartment complex now or the third floor of this building that has an apartment there, or whether he lives somewhere else, is sort of all over the place. So, people have said residency is a difficult thing to prove in court. Regardless, the way that he's beginning his political campaign is by lying and insisting on the lie, which cannot stand. Right? The people of our district deserve someone who at least is going to look them in the eye and say, these are my principles, these are my convictions, this is what I'm going to fight for, and you can count on me to do that. My opponent has already proven that he's not capable of offering that conviction.
We've also heard a lot of stories about how, as chairman of the Denton County GOP, a lot of grassroots conservatives were mistreated. I'm not quite sure.
I think we want to get to the heart of that too. So we really want our viewers, our supporters to understand that this is grassroots versus establishment. And then if you could talk about his history a little bit, and then let's talk about why there are trusted elected officials that are endorsing your opponent against the grassroots, which is very confusing for people. And we want to clear that up.
Sure. So I would encourage folks who are listening, go to failedleader.com, failedleader.com. That's a letter that was published by over 70 grassroots leaders, precinct chairs in Denton County and across Senate District 30 who have experience with my opponent under his quote-unquote leadership. This is not something my campaign did, totally independent of us. They document there, and very specifically, many of the things that happened. So my opponent has been twice formally censured by our county for, among other things, lying in the current race about something as simple as where he lives, for donating to a radical Democrat in a local mayoral race while serving as an official of our county party. He turned the screws on the grassroots precinct chairs who were trying to do everything they could to fight for good candidates who were running in local races at the precinct chair level and on up. He stopped holding meetings in April of the first year of his term because he realized that he basically lost control. He couldn't run a meeting. He knew that some votes were going to be taken against him. And so from April until December, the Denton County GOP did not have an executive committee meeting because he never called one. And there were a lot of good grassroots leaders from David Wiley and Jill Glover and others who were fighting against what he was doing. And so when he stands now and tries to present himself as a conservative, as someone who represents the conservative convictions of our Senate district, the people in our district, especially in Denton County, they just seethe with anger because of how exactly backward that is. In terms of why it is that many of the trusted statewides who we as the grassroots respect and others, you'll have to ask them individually. I can tell you that my race is not against them. I am not here to fight against any of those officials. I have no beef with them. I have relationships with some of them. I served as Angela Paxton's counsel during the impeachment, was very proud to serve in that way. And so met a number of these folks, and I'm ready to work with them on day one to pass good conservative legislation that's consistent with the principles grassroots have been fighting for so long here in Texas.
I think it's important to point out that I live in Tarrant County. Fran lives in Tarrant County. We are crazy busy with the things that we're involved with, and yet we are aware of all the issues with your opponent simply because so many people from Denton County have cried out to us, What do we do? This guy is terrible. What do we do? And now we've got people like Donald Trump and Dan Patrick and these people that are endorsing a guy that everybody knows is no good. So I want to share what I've been told because as a candidate, I would never expect you to share that information. So what I was told was that Dan Patrick, he leads the Senate. He was looking for a candidate to fill that seat, and there was nobody. And so he put his name behind the best they could find, which was a crappy person. I mean, no way around it. He's he is not a good candidate. But then Dan Patrick had to save face, and he's already endorsed this person. So now he has used all of his political capital and strong-armed all kinds of people into endorsing your opponent against the grassroots. And as much as we like to work with Dan Patrick, what he has done is wrong. He will never admit it, and the grassroots need to support you.
And I think the message to voters is listen to the people that have actually worked with Brent Hagenbu in Denton County. I see it all over the Facebook pages of grassroots activists up there. They will tell you the reality of what has really gone on. They will support what Jace has just said. And, trust the people that know the candidate, not the ones that are just, throwing their name behind something because Donald Trump or somebody else threw their name behind it.
So tell us, are there other lies that you want to address? Like, what is there anything from the campaign trail that you're like, I really want the people to hear this message?
Well, the first thing I should say is that my opponent is very much open to being told what to do. What that means is he will do whatever the last person in the room or the strongest person in the room instructs him to do. That is a recipe for disaster, for chaos, for disorder and dysfunction, which is what you see in his wake as the chairman of our county GOP. Now, he does, I think he's on his 6th or 7th direct attack mailer against me within the past 7 to 10 days. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So he attacks me because he says, well, Jace has some radical views on democracy. And my position is our founders gave us a republic, not a democracy, and thank God that they did. Because according to them, in their own words, democracies are characterized by two things, right? Short life and violent death. And that is not what they wanted for us, right? If you want to see the difference between a democracy, a direct democracy, and a republic, look at the differences and the consequences of the French and the American revolutions.
Exactly.
French Revolution led to what? The Reign of Terror and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Here in the United States, we've enjoyed over 250 centuries of prosperity and self-governance. So thanks be to God for the form of government we have. I'll say another sort of thing that he'll say, and I appreciate this morning on Mark Davis, actually, there was he says, my opponent by admission says that he's no longer promotable in the Air Force, whereas I have a stellar career as a United States Naval officer. Well, the reason I'm unpromotable in the Air Force anymore is because I stood up against the COVID vaccine and I won, right? They tried to kick me out just like they tried to kick everyone else out. And I managed to hang on because I knew some things that they were trying to do to me were simply illegal and they didn't have any authority to do it because of my background as an attorney. So I'm very proud of my history of service in the military, which continues today. Again, I'll probably never be promoted, but I've stood by my principles through thick and thin. I'm really proud of that. And so if you see something that's put out by my opponent, just know that these are the sorts of twists. This is the way he'll twist a number of things. I think because he's scraping the bottom of the barrel. I am who I say I am. I'm open about the positions that I've held in the past and ready to talk with anybody and everybody about it.
Fantastic. So I hope that our viewers understand that we're not wasting time here. We mean what we say. We have got to get good people elected, and we wish you all the best. Thank you for being on today.
Really.
Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate that. Thanks,
Thank
Fran. Yep. Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
All right, next person we have in the hot seat is John O'Shea. He is running for Congress in District 12. This used to be Kay Granger's seat. She has vacated it, and we want to find out why the people should be supporting you. So, Fran, why don't you tell us what you know about the race, and then we'll let John jump in.
Okay. Well, for starters, the outcome of the primary, there were 3 people running for this position, and the votes came down to Mr. Goldman with 44% and you with 26%. So therefore, the runoff. That's a pretty big margin. What do you think your chances are for winning that now in the runoff?
Well, first of all, thank you both ladies for having me on. What I would say is actually there were 5 candidates. There were 5?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
There were 3 who did not make the runoff, but honestly, they all 3 occupied my lane. So what kind of broke very early when, because I had announced back in April of last year that I was running. The other people did not enter until Kay Granger announced that she wasn't seeking re-election, because I was told I was crazy to go up against a 14-term incumbent who was chairwoman of appropriations.
And you did it anyway.
Yeah, not so crazy now.
No, well, when you're called by God, you don't put qualifications on it. So, I went ahead and ran. The other 3 people, well, Mr. Goldman was the handpick of the establishment. So the establishment quickly coalesced behind him. And then the grassroots.
Let me just say, we've never been a fan of Craig Goldman.
Well,
for the record.
yeah, okay, duly noted. So the other three kind of jumped in and kind of tried to take different pieces of the lane that I was currently occupying. So all three of the other people were outsiders, not career politicians, had been involved in the party at some level or had run for office previously. But, so I get it that it sounds like, well, my gosh, that's a big gap, 44 to 26%. But I would say that really, in essence, Craig Goldman and his outside PAC spent over $3 million and they couldn't break 44%. Despite having been in office down in Austin for 6 terms. So I think that kind of says more about him and the predicament he's in than the likelihood of me being able to rally the troops.
And I think statistically, isn't it true that the second place person in a runoff tends to win it? So we just have to get out the vote.
I know it also favors the conservative. And I know Mr. Goldman right now is running ads ad nauseum, promoting his conservative bona fides. But I will tell you, the first time we took the stage together, because he had tended to avoid any debate or any kind of public candidate forum together, he got up and said, I've been in office for 12 years now. I stand by my record. I encourage everybody to look at my record. I plan to go do in Washington, D.C. exactly what I did in Austin. And I got up and I said, well, I didn't know that we would have so much in common or that we would be in such agreement, because I do believe you need to look at his record, and I do believe he fully intends to go do in Washington, D.C. exactly what he did in Austin. And if he does, then God help us all. Yes.
Yeah. And so let's talk for a minute about some of the things he did in Austin. Just in this past session, Goldman voted for impeachment of the Attorney General. He voted for corporate welfare. He voted for social transitioning of children, and he voted for a digital ID for Texans.
Well, and if that weren't bad enough, he was also the only Republican that voted present not voting when SJR 35 came up, which said that you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in Texas elections.
That's true. So for me, that doesn't speak highly of his conservative qualifications to go represent us in Washington. And my observation with Craig has been in the Texas House that he's kind of like you said, Brent Hagenbu is, he's very willing to do what he's told by the most powerful person in the room. And I think that's where he's followed in Austin, and I think that's what he will do in Washington, D.C.
Well, I think that, and I don't personally know the man, so I only have his voting track record and common relationships to go by. But I think there's almost kind of been 3 stages to Mr. Goldman's career. The first 2, he ran grassroots and ran as a conservative,
yes, he did.
And he honestly did kind of carry through, and the grades kind of reflected that. But then to your point, he then became part of the leadership team. In fact, having elevated himself up to this last legislative session to the party caucus chair. And at that point, his voting went off a cliff, and he really betrayed conservative values. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the seat became open. And then, lo and behold, he found his conservative backbone again and started running as if he were a conservative.
Did you already mention, did he vote to impeach Paxton?
Not only did he vote to impeach Paxton, but when State Representative John Smithy was giving that very impassioned speech explaining how it was a violation of the Texas Constitution over precedent, it violated Texas code, didn't afford due process, and was based on hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay, Craig Goldman, per Ken Paxton, was out whipping the vote on the floor at that point in time, saying, I don't care about that. If you don't vote to impeach, there will be repercussions with the speaker.
And boy, have those repercussions been nice in this primary season.
Yeah, I don't think
exactly what he imagined.
That wasn't what he intended.
Yes,
no.
yes. No. So tell us about any lies that he's got out there about you that we can refute and set the record straight.
So, there have been, unlike Mr. Yarbrough, I haven't had 7 different attack mailers, but I've had 3, and there's a series of commercials that continues to emphasize them routinely.
And they can be very believable, right?
Sure.
And so we want people to be clear. What is the truth?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I get why Mr. Goldman's doing this, because he would rather portray me as a bad person rather than run on the basis of his true voting record. And I get it. But the first thing that he said was, in fact, I believe I was on Charlie Kirk's show when I made some mention of the fact that, I used to call myself a conservative, but when they eviscerate our Constitution and they take away our God-given rights that they were authorized to protect, that was their duty, then I consider myself a restorer, and then we need to reform government and get back to our constitutional roots. Well, boom, immediately this mailer comes out. John O'Shea admits he's no longer a conservative. Well,
wow.
They took that little line, one line. If you'd given the 2 or 3 before that or the 2 or 3 after, you would have completely understood the context.
Of course.
Okay, touche. You know, they play that kind of political gamesmanship, whatever. I'm still going to keep saying what I'm saying, and the truth will prevail and will resonate with people. The second one that came out was said that John O'Shea does not support Donald Trump and didn't vote for him or the border wall in 2016, didn't vote for Senator Cruz in 2018, didn't even vote for his friend Ken Paxton.
I saw that one.
Well, the truth of the matter is I was out of the country. My wife had a very rare form of brain cancer, by definition a stage 4 cancer. I didn't know if she was going to live because, candidly speaking, even when people do survive it, 85% have a relapse within 2 years. My wife had always wanted to spend time in South America, not knowing if she was going to survive, knowing that I needed to focus on her and then try and raise our kids, in effect, as a single parent, because she's been pretty severely disabled as a result of 9 months of hospitalization and surgeries and radiation and different procedures. And we lived 3 hours away from the consulate in a country that had an ineffective mail system. And so I did not participate in voting during that time. But in my campaign, I say it's God, family, country. And it's in that order with those priorities for a reason. And so I don't think Ken's going to hold it against me that I prioritized taking care of my family for 5 years over making sure I was here to vote for him.
I think those are the kind of nasty mailers that twist the truth. That we're going to see over and over again as we interview the rest of these candidates.
And candidly speaking, he knows my story because
of course he knows
the COVID lockdowns were actually the impetus. In fact, that's how we really initially got to meet, because I went down to testify about being precluded from being able to take my wife out for our daily visit. And, you know, anybody who's had any kind of cognitive impairment or, you know, dementia or anything like that, the highlight of their day is looking forward to loved ones coming to visit or to take them out. And so to have to explain to a grown woman through a window screen for 3 months that she wasn't being punished, it was more than I could take. And so despite knowing that, he chose to use that vector of attack. And candidly, I think that says more about him than it does about me.
It does. And there's a third one?
There is a third one. It's a new one that just came out. Apparently, Tarrant County is suing me for unpaid taxes, which is news to me. And in fact, the funny thing of it is, once that was brought up, you go and click the link, and there is a suit. And oh, by the way, I'm not named. There was a business. I've been a business person for the last 10 or 12 years, and I have either been an investor or an owner of a number of companies. One of them that I invested in was a pub in Arlington called J.R. Bentley's. In fact, we've held several events there. It didn't make it, and the people who were running it and the people who were the registered agent apparently didn't pay the property tax. Well, I picked up and started making all the bank payments by myself for a year and then got the listing, and now it's going to be sold. Well, when the bank notified me, because they had no way to contact me, I didn't know that there were unpaid property taxes. The bank said, hey, this is the amount, this is owed for 2022. I wrote a personal check, and it was not a pleasant personal check to write, but that was paid in March. The mailer just came out here in May.
Wow.
So even then, not only was I not named, I'm not being sued, but again, I think it reflects more of my character. It wasn't fair, but it was the right thing to do, so I stepped up and paid it.
And it reflects your opponent's character that he's manipulating the situation.
Correct.
So.
And the lesson here to be learned is don't believe what's in those attack ads and mailers. Throw them in the trash.
So before we continue with the rest of our interviews, if anybody, starts watching and stops, I just want them to know what the voting window is.
So yeah, early voting begins May 20th, and it runs through that Friday, May 24th, and then we have the holiday weekend, and then that Tuesday, May 28th. And primary runoffs have a much lower turnout, so it becomes very critical. I know they favor conservatives because the way I perceive it, I've got an army of volunteers right now who would walk over broken glass to go vote for me, whereas he has check writers who may be out of town or can't be inconvenienced. But it will come down to a small percent turnout. We only had 71,000 votes in the primary. I'm expecting it to be 30 to 32,000 votes in the runoff.
So last question before we have you leave. Tell us what your district is. Like who's voting. Maybe people aren't in your district, but they know somebody that's in it. So tell us what we're
Right, no,
covering.
that's a good point. Yeah, the way it's been kind of gerrymandered, it's an interesting shape. It looks kind of like the state of Massachusetts now. but it's the western half of Tarrant County. So really from just the western side of Arlington on, it covers Richland Hills, Haltom, and it goes then along the county line out to Parker all the way to Mineral Wells, but it doesn't have the bottom third of Parker County. That's Roger Williams district. So, but if you're in Weatherford or Aledo or Hudson Oaks, those areas, and then like I said, Fort Worth, Crowley, Lake Worth, that whole area as well.
Okay, and that's Congressional District 12 currently with Kay Granger.
Yeah, and I would say, in fact, similar to Mr. Yarbrough, I also have been on Mark Davis a couple of times, and he made something that kind of had a little light bulb effect with me, and he said, if you win, you will be the very first conservative House representative to represent that district. And I had to stop and think, well, for 28 years it was Kay Granger, and then prior to that it was Pete Guerin. And then before that was Jim Wright. So he's right. They've never...
Pete Guerin, is he related to Charlie?
Yes, and he was a Democrat.
God, help us.
But actually, ironically, he's way more conservative than his Republican brother. And Pete was a Democrat, but he was one of the old Blue Dog Democrats.
That's not saying much for Charlie.
No, that's true.
All right, John O'Shea, we are looking forward to congratulating you when you win. Good luck.
Thank you very much, lady. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Andy Hopper, who is running against Lynn Stuckey in HD 64, which is mostly, I believe, Weiss and Denton counties. So
yes, ma'am.
Welcome, Andy. We're glad to have you.
Hey, Fran. Hey, Julie.
Hey, I'm so glad you're here. So there is a lot of energy. Like, nobody can say that you have a dead campaign. Whether you win or lose, I don't know, but you have got very energetic supporters. So, but it's not your first rodeo. Like,
No, ma'am.
you ran before. So tell us about, I guess it was 2 years ago when you ran.
Yeah, so we ran for this thing 2 years ago, and it was the closest race in the whole state. It was 88 votes out of 20,000, essentially, on election night. It was bonkers, and we did a recount and the whole bit. But, as you know, we're activists. Like, my attitude is like, winning's one thing, but changing hearts and minds, that's what we're trying to do. And we can see that happening, right? And so ran this past primary. We actually started last June, so we've been running for a year now. And we came in first in the primary, so beat him by almost 1,000 votes, and 47 to 43. So we're in a really good position.
Wait. So that was this year?
This year, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so 2 years ago when you ran, how did that end up?
It was 88 votes in 2022.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
88 votes out of, it was 0.4%. It's the closest race, I think, in the state of Texas. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that's how, but, the cool part is that we were the closest race to beating an incumbent. Mike Alcott, I think, was the other Republican that came very close. And so, anyways, to me, it was a privilege to run with all these other conservatives like Mike and Shelley, and so it's also a privilege to see that they actually made it in March 5th, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So,
but you've got to be exhausted.
We are, but what's really weird is like we're at this point now where like we're used to it. You know what I mean?
This is my life, right? This is
the
what I do.
non-life is our life. It's totally cool.
But you've been running Wise County Conservatives.
Yes. So we have us and a bunch of other families started Wise County Conservatives. And it's been a real pleasure because the thing is, we've never had anything like that in Wise County, and so many other counties have started them. It's been a movement, and you guys have been like the spearhead of that. So we're really, blessed that TTP has been such a partner in crime, not partner in crime, but, but that's what we're not trying to do anything other than just red pill people. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what
well, and I think that's important for people to know that you were already an activist. You were already doing what True Texas Project people already believe in before you ever became a candidate. So you're the real deal. Like vetting you is a lot easier because we have a track record to look at.
Right. And with that, of course, you say all the things that need to be said on every single issue. You're not, you cannot be an activist and then run for office and not be on record. Like we are on record on everything. Told people what bills to advocate for and all the things. So it's actually kind of interesting. But, anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. I think we're in a very good position. I think that the way that the other side is acting is a very good sign. I think that they are losing their mind. And I think that what's really cool, too, is the fact that because so many conservatives won on March 5th, it will not be the same for any incumbent that manages to make it through the runoff. I mean, these, you have local electeds and stuff that are sitting there thinking, well, but your opponent has had all this seniority and they're going to be so effective. I'm like, not in the new House. If you've associated with Dade Phelan, if you've pushed Democrat chairs, if you impeach Ken Paxton, there is no home for you.
Right.
And so just so you know, like, we're going to be much more effective at getting in there and working with these solid conservatives to advance conservative legislation.
It's going to be a brand new ball game for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. I know Fran preaches this all the time, that when we changed our name to True Texas Project, we changed our mission, and that instead of necessarily focusing on elections, which we want good people to win, but regardless of who wins, we're going to hold them accountable. So even if Lynn gets in there, we're going to make his life hell. That's our goal. So if you get in there, it's going to be a good partnership.
Well, so I want you guys to hold me accountable.
We
So
absolutely will hold you
that's
accountable.
my deal.
We will.
So anyway.
And see, that just speaks to your integrity, that the first words out of your mouth are, well, I want you to hold me accountable. Like, there are a lot of people that would be like, okay, now I'm in, just leave me alone and let me do my thing. But no, we're going to be right there step by step.
Well.
So tell us what's going on. Has it gotten ugly? I don't live in Wise County, so I don't see it all, but has it gotten as bad as some of the others?
I think it has. Full disclosure, I don't know what he says about me. I actually systematically avoid everything. I don't
smart.
read it. I tell the kids, like, when they bring in the mail, it's like, only tell me new things and do it in generalities. Because you need to meet voters. Like, you can't walk around mad. And I honestly think that's part of the reason that we're effective, is the fact that we don't walk around mad. Lynn walks around mad. He's very upset man. He's a very upset man right now.
Do you know him, Fran? I've not ever interacted with him.
I'm aware of him through the legislature, and I also did a nice perusal of his Facebook page on Saturday to kind of get an idea. And I don't recall specifics, but yeah, he's saying nasty things about
the one thing I'll say, like, first of all, if we get through all this, like, I'm going to give him a personal thanks. Like, he's done me more favors and the things that he said and the things that he's done than anyone else could have possibly done. And it's I think it's through hubris, in my opinion. And I think they all are guilty of this. I mean, probably any candidate, any incumbent probably gets in there and they probably think this is my seat. And that just drips off of everything that they say. But I think that it's also really telling and really interesting when they are so bothered that now they have to make up lies about you lying. Like, the one that I think is really hilarious is that I have never gone after him on his gender mod vote. Like, not at all. Because you know what? He voted right on gender mod. I've never said he's a monster. I just said he's a rhino. Like, if you voted to, perpetuate the practice of castrating children, you are a monster. And I have never said he is a monster. But it's funny that he actually has all these ads that are marketed that says, Andy Hopper is lying about he even had Tom Oliverson get out there and put an ad out during the primary. It says, Lynn's opponent is going to be lying about his gender mod. And I'm like, I've never lied about it. But that's, it's wild, but it actually shows you their, like, level of desperation of where they're at. So,
wait, Tom Oliverson said that? He's the one running for speaker, right?
I didn't see him say it. It was cited to him. It was verbiage that was cited to Tom Oliverson. We would have to ask Tom and say, did you say this? I intend to ask him that. But it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not trying to, like, it's not damaging to me because the problem is that you are a conservative activist. You do know so many people. And when you show up at people's doors and you sit there and talk about liberty, and then you have this guy that gets out there and says, he's diabolical. He's trying to, and it's like, that doesn't jive with people's personal opinion of you. Know too many people. You've been too involved for too long. The thing that I actually think is the most hilarious is that, for the longest time, he would put out this mailer over and over again. And it was funny because that particular mailer, the exact design with the exact same icons, came out and was paid for by Dade Phelan in 2022. And then somehow it ends up being paid for by Lynn Stuckey with the exact same, like, there's some connective tissue there. I don't know.
Yes.
So, but anyways, it's like Andy Hopper wants to invade Mexico. I don't know, but that's like an extremely popular position in the year 2024 at this point. I mean, people are so mad. And when the Mexican government says, if you try to enforce that law change that says that, it's a crime to, invade Texas illegally, and if you try to bring them back, we're going to take Mexican officials and stop you on the Texas side. And I'm like, that's exactly what I postulated. But now Mexico is advocating it, and it's like, we're not outraged. Lynn Stuckey, where's the outrage? I mean, it's like you're more concerned about Mexican sovereignty than American sovereignty. So what I actually said is that we should be willing to use every tool in our toolbox to secure the Texas border, up to and including putting the Texas military forces on the other side of the Rio Grande, which is a solid military strategy because the border's in the middle of the river. Anyways, I just think it's kind of funny. It ended up being too popular, and he started taking it off stuff. And I think, the one I think is also kind of funny is that, we're all against CBDCs, right? Like, we know it's coming. The feds are going to push it.
You probably better say what that is, because not everybody's
central bank digital currency. This is like China's social credit system. So what we're actually talking about is, what can Texas do to actually secure Texas freedom against that? And so there was a bill, I think it was Mark DeRazio that had in the House. I want to say it was originated in the Senate as well. But it was basically like, let's create a gold-backed currency in Texas. And it should have passed in the House. It was one of the bills that died, probably because they were too busy impeaching Ken Paxton. But, because you supported this gold currency bill, you want to ban the U.S. dollar in Texas. And I'm like, that's actually almost treasonous to say that. Like, if you aren't willing to protect Texans against CBDC.
This is his claim against you?
Yes. I mean, it's hilarious.
You're kidding.
No, it's bonkers.
Wow.
But the thing that's interesting is if you look at all the information and all the stuff coming out, is like, he's totally seeded the ground. Like, Andy Hopper's too far right. I'm happy to have that title.
Too far right.
To have that
Put
title.
that on my tombstone.
He's far right. He's an extreme. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Like, the deal is that I'm happy to have the endorsement of Ted Cruz and Sid Miller and Ken Paxton and Alan West and Rick Green. By the way, the strangest mailer. Now, it's paid for by a PAC called Defend Rural Texas PAC. Now, if you ever look into that PAC is pretty much funded by Glenn Rogers and Dade Phelan and all these, I want to say Justin Holland, but I'm not 100% confident that. Basically, all of the rhinos that are now fighting for their lives paid for this PAC to exist. And so they sent a mailer out, and it had a picture of me and Don Huffines and me in a picture of Rick Green.
Sweet.
As though it's like, you are the company you keep. And it's like, and I'm like,
sign me up.
Yeah, that's fine. Obviously, these people have a real issue with Rick Green and Don Huffines. I think it's really interesting.
Wow.
So these people are not with us. They're nominal Republicans at best. I think that, what we have seen is that the same people who are funding Nikki Haley are funding TLR, they're funding Dade Phelan, funding all of these rhinos that are running for their lives. And that's what we're standing against. The same thing we see in Washington is what we're seeing at the local level, is we're seeing, people understanding that their legislators are willing to dispense with the most conservative and effective attorney general in the entire country, and that these people are up to no good, and they're never going to save Texas. They're never going to stand against the globalist agenda, and it's going to require a new breed of conservatives in the Texas House to pull that off. And I think that we're actually going to get that.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So your district would be, I know it's a little bit of Denton County, and Wise County. Is there any other area that?
It's Wise, and I would say this like the northwest quadrant of Denton. So it's like 35 to 380, and then it sucks up all of Denton, and it also sucks up Robeson Ranch, if you know where that is. So anyways, that's the extent. Wise County, I don't think, honestly, if they had a time machine, Dade Phelan and his cronies, both for Dade Phelan and for Lynn Stuckey, they would go back in time and change the redistricting maps. Like, that was the biggest mistake that they ever made. It's the same thing with David Covey's race, right? I mean, David Covey is strong in the county that they added in Dade Phelan's race. And it was interesting. David Covey's race was 47-43, just like mine, 47-43. He had a third, candidate. We had a third candidate. He won, I believe it was Orange County by the exact same percentage that I won Wise County by.
Wow.
It was like completely identical. And so basically what they did is they put a county in this district that is extremely conservative, and then they expected this existing state rep to basically do crazy things like put Democrats in charge of committees and impeach Ken Paxton, and then somehow magically get this county's support. And like, that did not work at all. And so we won Wise County 2 years ago by 64%. Elaine and I, we were over 70%. Lynn Stuckey only got 30% of support in Wise County. Every precinct, I won every precinct both years. And so what's wild is Wise County actually outvoted Denton. So we actually had 238 more voters in Wise than there were in the Denton portion of the district, which they never predicted that was even possible. So anyways, it's going to be a very interesting situation, because I think even the folks across, conservatives across the whole district have recognized who this guy is, what he stands for, and the fact that it's not an exaggeration to say out loud that their representative is Dade Phelan. It is not Lynn Stuckey. And so he does exactly what he's told, just like all of them.
Yep.
But I think that, when you realize that we're now deep in a runoff, we found out today that the Democrats probably made a deal with Dade Phelan, which is why they never had any consequence for fleeing in Washington. And here we are, like, if there was ever a time, if you're a House incumbent, to say, you know what, I repudiate Dade Phelan. He's a complete swamp creature. He's a reprobate. I'm never going to support him. Why wouldn't they do that? Like,
I wondered that.
The fact they won't sign the contract for Texas, an extremely controversial document that says that maybe your boss shouldn't be your primary funder, things like this. It's wild, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah. So this is going to sound like a dumb question, but again, we want to make sure anybody watching this podcast they may not live in the district, but they might know people who do. So tell us what towns are in Wise County, because they may not know what Wise County is.
So Decatur, Bridgeport, Newark, Alvord, Paradise, Chico, Aurora, New Fairview. Those are the towns in Wise County. And then in Denton County, you have Crum, Sanger, Denton proper. So that's kind of the extent. And Robeson Ranch, which is technically part of Denton County, or Denton City.
And Robeson has been big supporters of you, as far as I have
Well,
seen.
it's an interesting change, right? Because yes, we have really developed some very dedicated, true believer conservatives in that neighborhood. There always were, by the way. But that neighborhood's difficult because you can't knock it. And so getting the word out from an activism perspective is difficult. So I think 2 years ago, maybe we got 25% and there's 2 precincts. And I think that this time we got, 45, something like that, which is a huge change. But that is 1/3 of the Denton County vote, is that one neighborhood. So that's been one of the challenges. But I think that it's pretty cool because these people are excited. I mean, that was the area that an elected official in Denton County was basically lambasting Kyle Rittenhouse. I don't know if you guys heard about all that, but Kyle came out there, and so anyways, it's really interesting to see, and it's very, like, if you don't support Kyle Rittenhouse and what he did and his act of bravery, then I would just so far to say you are not a Republican. Like, that is kind of where we're at. Like, this is what we need to be standing up for: is Second Amendment rights, the right to defend yourself and your family. And if you can't really espouse that or articulate that, I think we have a real problem. But anyways, he came to all these polls, and in every rural area, people were just like, "Is that Kyle Rittenhouse?" And guy's such a patriot. So
yeah, people get excited when they see him.
Yes,
so.
ma'am.
All right. Well, any last words? Otherwise, we will move on to the next candidate and wish you luck.
No, I just really appreciate y'all having me on. I think that it is actually quite an opportunity to kind of dissect and talk about these things in a really open way of all the lies and stuff. But, I think voters are smart. I think they're getting smarter. And I'm not one to think that, people just always believe. I think that what I hear door to door is that people are just the frequency, the deluge of these things make people say, where there's smoke, there must be fire. These people wouldn't do this if they weren't in desperate trouble. They did the same thing against Brandon Gill, right? Brandon Gill, is a guy. Little Wise County has never had these contentious races, and then all of a sudden, you have the 2 or 3 races that are occurring in that, and they're like, people like, nobody's ever called anybody Nazis before. Like, this has never happened, and I don't think I believe
Nazis.
that person. You know what I mean? Like, the only thing I ever see is, like, if you look at federal politics, anyone who says that someone else is a Nazi is a Democrat, like, with no exceptions. So I actually think these are really, really bad tactics that they're employing, because maybe they work in other areas, but they don't work in this district. So
Yeah. Very good. All right. Well, good luck to you. I can't wait to see you in Austin.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
We now have Cheryl Bean with us, and I'm just going to be honest. I don't know anything about your race, and I see you're running against somebody named John McQueenie. I've never even heard of him, which I think is probably a good sign. So first, just tell us what your district is, what the number is, and what the area is.
Okay, so I'm District 97. That is actually
For State House.
State House, and that's actually the district that Craig Goldman is vacating.
Yes. Okay. And we've already discussed we're not real excited about Craig Goldman. So, okay.
Well, I understand that. I understand why. So, anyway, so it starts about TCU in that area, goes west to the Parker County line, picks up White Settlement. Other than that, it stays below 30 and goes to Benbrook and Crowley, down to that far. So Tanglewood, Wedgewood, and down through that area. is where it is. Yeah.
Well, fill us in. Like, tell us about the race. Like, are there lies or attacks, or you're just skating through this and you just can't wait for winning on election day?
Well, why don't I tell a little bit about how we got here?
Okay.
So there were 3 candidates in the original race during the primary. None of us had been in politics per se before, so we were all new to it. And so there was Leslie Robnett, McQueenie, and myself. And in the end, when we got right down to it, I'm the one who's been here the longest. I've lived in this district over 60 years. So I grew up here, went to high school here. My kids grew up here, went to high school in the district. And now my grandkids are growing up in, not high school yet, thank goodness. But, but I like to tell the story that, when my graduating high school class was like Bob Boland's, Mayor Bob Boland's son. I've sat on PTA boards with Mayor Betsy Price. And my grandkids now play baseball with Mayor Maddie Parker. So I'm really a long-time hometown girl. But anyway, we ended up at the race. When we got to the end, they said, oh, there's no way you're going to end up in a runoff. Just plan on it. It's going to be cool. Well, at 1:00 in the morning, I won. And
I remember
won it outright.
thinking that you were done.
Yes. And in fact, I was called from the ballot board people. I happened to have friends on it and said, go home. You've won. It's over. Great, wonderful. Unfortunately, at 6:00, I got a different call. Said, well, you didn't quite win. And in the end, I was 56 votes shy out of
56 votes.
18,300.
And then you're like, I could have knocked 56 more doors. I could have made 56 more phone calls.
Right. That's what I felt like. But, God has his own sense of humor, and he has some reason why he wanted that to be such as it is. But I was sitting at 49.6. My opponent now, McQueenie, was sitting at 29, so there was almost a 30 gap or whatever, huge gap in there, and the other opponent behind that. So I felt real good about it. Everybody thought, okay, we've got this made in the shade, and everything was going well. So it has gotten to be a closer race now, largely because of all the slander that's out there and the fact that Abbott decided to weigh in, which was honestly a big mystery to everyone because I pretty much had everybody else at the state and local level.
So has it kind of now then become a grassroots versus establishment?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, and it's stacking up really big in terms of that way. And so over the last couple of weeks, I think the hits are just coming day in and day out. And they're so kind of like Andy's. They're so out there. You're
like, where did this come from? Who is this person they're talking about? It's not me.
Who are they talking about? Yeah. And I hate to say it. In fact, I walk in and introduce myself to the Republican Women's Club Saturday morning. I said, I am going to introduce you to the latest Nazi that's moved to Fort Worth.
There's that word again.
I can't find my swastika. I don't know what happened to it. It must be hiding out with the stick that I beat my grandchildren with.
Oh,
gosh.
Yes.
And be careful. They're going to repossess my car, because I don't pay my taxes and I don't do this and I don't do that. And
so it's the same tactics they're using against John, where you don't pay your taxes, and against Andy, you're a Nazi. And
I don't think they can think up new tactics. They have to copy from everybody else and then from previous
They just throw whatever out there. It's legal. You can lie on campaigns.
Legal, and they do.
And in your race, I think it's particularly difficult because none of the candidates had ever held office before, so we have no voting record on which to evaluate any of you.
Right.
And so people have to come up with these other things to say, oh, yeah, she's a bad person because of this and that.
Well, that's actually, let me address this because, again, we don't know you very well ourselves, right? Yeah. I mean, we've interviewed you before online or whatever, but you just mentioned some names and you said, Maddie Parker and Betsy Price. And I'm just like, oh, please don't mention those names because everybody out there watching is going to be like, what? She's friends with them? I'm not supporting this woman. So we just need to hear from you. What is it that you believe and what are your goals?
Okay. Well, I'd like to set that record straight really quick.
Okay.
Despite having grown up and been in the world with Betsy Price, I campaigned for Tim O'Hare.
Okay.
It took a big, strong stand there.
We love Tim O'Hare.
I know. I know you do. I do too. So no, I am not in that camp at all, just to be perfectly honest. So that's not it. But I do think we don't have a record in terms of one of us has sat in a House position before, but we do have a record. For instance, if you were going to run for an office like this, you would think that you had been involved in politics or in the community or an organization somewhere. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Hopefully.
Yeah, you would think so. So if you look at me, I'm precinct chair, just like some of the other guys in front of me, very actively there. I'm an active member in both of the Republican Women Club and the local thing. But at the state level, I am actually very active with Texas Values. In fact, got their 2023 Kelly Shackelford Award this year for the citizen, not elected politician, that did the most for faith, family, and freedom in Texas. That's a pretty big deal.
That's nice.
I'm also
Congratulations.
very active with Texas Public Policy Forum, and then at the national level with American First Policy and First Liberty. Have worked with all of these for a long time. My opponent has never been a part of any political group, period.
I guess that's why I've never heard of him.
That's right. So you think, well, maybe he wasn't politically inclined. Maybe he was involved in the community. Once again, I currently sit on 4 boards, including a public school, charter school board, and the MHMR board, which our friend Tim O'Hare put me on to make sure it doesn't, do anything crazy. It's not. It's doing good. And several others. Okay, and I've been president of the association that's for the business that I am most prevalent in right now. My opponent, nothing. He has done absolutely nothing. So let's look at our voting records. That is a record that counts.
Yes.
It's vote. That's what we're going to do, right? So I pretty much vote in everything. I think of the last 10 years or decades, you might find a primary I missed because I was on vacation, but I voted in everything. And I voted Republican longer than my opponent has been alive.
Oh.
I don't know if that's a good thing to say or not, but it is. A good, solid, consistent Republican, right?
Yes.
My opponent voted Democrat in 2014 and then one after that for the opponent of Craig Abbott, for Wendy Davis.
Oh.
So,
Okay, wait, and yet Greg Abbott has come out in support of your opponent? Mm-hmm. This guy that, wow.
I suspect someone didn't do their homework in his office, if you want.
Oh, imagine that. Imagine
yeah,
that.
so I don't know what that is. But anyway, and then when it comes to things like primaries or runoffs, you will rarely see him show up at the polls. So you can see there is a very different track record. And there's also a very different philosophy. For me, I walked into this knowing that, oh my gosh, the House is in trouble. It's being run by, like an anarchy or some kind of dictatorship. It's not being effective. 5 sessions and we didn't pass any of our 8, Republican priorities.
We harp on that all the time. Mm-hmm.
By gosh, we have got to get rid of Democrat chairs. Mm-hmm. Well, my opponent said I was stupid for thinking that would possibly work in Texas. Absolutely stupid. They've got to have the Democrats and they've got to have them on board in order to be able to make this whole thing work. And I stood up consistently and said, well, then I'm stupid because I absolutely disagree with everything you've just said. We don't want Democrat chairs. We want term limits on that.
So is it safe to say that you would support this new contract?
Oh, I've already signed it.
Is it contract for Texas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Did I get that right? Okay.
And when asked at one of our forums recently, my opponent said, well, he supports some of it, but there's some things that would tie his hands behind the back and he couldn't deal with it. And
that's the sign of an establishment Republican.
Well, especially one who's been largely funded by Dade Phelan and are his PACs, associated PACs. Here we go again, right?
Yes. He doesn't want to alienate Dade Phelan just in case.
Just in case. Well, I think he's dependent on Dade Phelan. I think he's already sold out to that side of the world, quite frankly. So,
okay. So Cheryl, you are you're not a Nazi. You don't beat your child with a stick, and you aren't behind on your taxes. Is there anything else you want to say to people before we have you leave?
Yeah, I think the other one they're attacking me on is accusing me of contributing to extreme liberals. I think the current one is who tried to, get Abbott to defund police in Austin or something. I have no idea where that came from.
They just make it up, I'm telling you.
And they've said I run a PAC that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and it gives to these liberals and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't run any PAC. I've never run any PAC in my entire life. Don't know where that's come in. In fact, the only PAC I really have ever given to is one of the little local builders PACs. And guess what? Their budget is...
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's small. Yeah. And it's oriented to help people to be able to afford housing by working on the property taxes. They support candidates that get rid of some of their regulations, like everybody shouldn't have to pay for an extra $1,000 for an electrical vehicle plug in it because not everyone drives one. But that's one of the initiatives that we work in and on the permitting things. And so that's just a ridiculous statement. And it's just really reaching out there for something. don't even know where most of it comes from.
Because they know that it's difficult for you to communicate any rebuttal at the 11th hour and to all the different people that are going to see it. So hopefully people will share this video and get the truth out there in time for the runoff.
Right.
So
I hope so too. So,
okay.
Yeah, those are the main ones. So
that's fantastic. Thank you for this conversation. Thanks for
thank
coming
you.
on, and good luck. We will see you in Austin, I hope.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, well, I think we've probably saved not the best for last, but maybe the most dramatic and intense for last. So this is the one that's probably nearest and dearest to me and Fran, because you are in Northeast Tarrant, which is where we got our start. We have fought alongside you for 4 years now. I mean, really? Or has it been that long? I mean, because you ran 2 years ago, so maybe 3 years, right? And we have been... just floored by your work ethic. Like, there is no candidate that has ever worked harder than you. And that is saying a lot. Like, my standards are really high and you have met them. So super excited to have you here.
Don't forget, Julie, that we were very strong supporters of his opponent in the beginning.
Yeah. Have we said his name yet?
Her name.
His name. David Lowe.
I'm David Lowe.
Running for House District 91 against... the woman that I cannot stand, who I am so passionate about exposing, because she's just downright evil. I have no other way to say it. I'm so disgusted and disappointed her. And Fran's right. We supported her from the get-go.
We supported her in the beginning. We've known her for a very, very long time. And in the early days of her first term or two, she was just a stellar conservative representative, but like so many
stellar.
others,
I mean, we never thought she would be like the best. I don't know that stellar is ever a word I would have used.
She was good, but like so many other elected representatives, they get elected and then they just do this sharp left turn and start doing what leadership tells them to do instead of what the voters in their constituents
which we have kind of come to expect, and yet. In her campaigns against you, she has told the nastiest, outright lies. I mean, this woman has literally no moral background. So
we should
just start
David
with
talk.
the lies, because we've got to refute these.
Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Yes, she is the product of a broken system, right? Time and time again, with few exceptions, you see good politicians, good conservatives go bad. Now, just the other night, I actually had a voter email me a commercial, while I was rocking my 14-month-old baby to sleep. The commercial said that I was profiting from the exploitation of children. And it was the nastiest commercial I've ever seen. They've accused me of being a Nazi, even though I married a Jewish woman. They've said I've participated in the burning down of abortion clinics, that I want to execute women who have an abortion. 2022, she ran the most deceptive campaign ad of the year, according to the Dallas Morning News, where she cut off my quote and making me sound like I was pro-choice. To be honest with you, I almost need a translator here just so somebody can't take my voice and use it against me. I'm running on my record of service to my country, my record of service to local law enforcement, my service as a precinct chair in 2 different counties, the former regional director of the Republican Party of Texas. And you know what, to be honest with you, and as I told you guys 2 years ago, people laughed me out of the room when I decided to run against one of the most powerful people in Texas politics. She spent $1 million against a retired veteran, stay-at-home dad, and beat me by 789 votes in the runoff 2 years ago. This primary, last primary 2 years ago, she got 1,300 votes more than me. This time she got 300 more votes, so I'm excited about the May 28th runoff.
Wow. Okay, so we really need to break this down. I want to go over, each lie is like more horrendous than the one before it. And on top of that, she lies about her own record. So I want to give us a good solid foundation of just how horrible Stephanie Click is. Okay, so tell us about some of her votes. And Fran, you might jump in because I know you're very familiar because you track these things. Tell us about some of the votes that she's lied about or misled voters. And then I want to get into the lies she's told about you.
Okay, so people that know her will believe anything that she has to say because, she's been there a long time, lived there a long time. So Jeff Younger, his child was being transitioned into a girl without his consent, and there were multiple bills, 6 bills that entered the Texas House 2 years ago, and they all died. Now, my opponent says, hey, well, I passed it off to Calendars Committee, but it's like a hot potato.
Wait, first you need to say what authority did she have?
Yes, she was the chair of the Public Health Committee, and only the chairwoman or chairman of the committee can actually give the bill a hearing. Furthermore, that is the only one that can really maneuver the bill in order to get it to the next committee. And they play all sorts of games. So she held on to a bill for 45 days, waiting till it was too late to pass it off to the next committee. And that was House Bill 1399, which would have banned liability insurance for medical providers that provide this horrific abuse towards children.
And can I add that of
Yes,
those
ma'am.
6 bills that year, that was the only one that she gave a hearing. The other 5 didn't even get a hearing, and this was probably the weakest of the 6 that were proposed, I believe, through the Senate.
So she did the bare minimum and still botched it up because then she said we ran out of time.
Yes. The bill that I wanted passed was the one that would have labeled it as child abuse and made it a crime.
To transition a
Yes.
child's sex.
Yes. And so Jeff Younger, his child the transition continued because my opponent killed the bill that would have protected his son. And now actually his son has been moved to another state because Texas failed to act, and that child is going to receive surgical transition in a couple of years.
And yet Stephanie claims, well, I got it out of committee and it's not my fault.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? And then she almost lost in the primary because of it. Then she finally passes a bill in the 89th session last year, and while she passed that, she continues to kill other bills. For example, Senate Bill 162, which already passed the Republican-controlled Senate, it would have prevented parents from changing their child's gender on the birth certificate. She also killed another bill that would have labeled it as child abuse. We have a network here in Tarrant County that is actually helping parents transition their kids by moving them out of state or giving them transportation. That organization, all of those people are child abusers, and they would be stopped if Stephanie Click had the guts to stop
And
it.
let's reiterate that Fran explained she's the chair.
She's the chair of the committee. So she decides whether or not a hearing is going to be held on any bills that are assigned to that committee. Like I said, in 23, she did a hearing on 1 out of 6, the weakest of the 6 bills. In 2024, she did hold the hearing fairly quickly after it was assigned, but it was totally grassroots pressure on the entire legislature that forced her to do that. It got to the point where she knew she could no longer deny the hearing, deny moving it quickly through the system because the grassroots were up in arms. So,
Okay, and then there's another big one, elections.
Yeah,
yes.
in 2019, she was chairman of the Elections Committee, which is another very powerful committee. And that year, SB 8, I believe it was called, Senator Hughes filed a comprehensive election reform bill that it went through the Senate easily. All of the grassroots were behind it. And again, she stalled it in her Elections Committee until it was too late to do anything with it.
So she has a history of doing this, being the committee chair, killing bills that all the grassroots want passed, and then making up excuses and excuses. And because we live in Tarrant County and we know who the players are, there are multiple grassroots Republican conservatives, right? That they're not completely establishment, but they're not fully with the conservatives. Like they kind of play both sides, and you just really never know where they're going to stand. And they have sided with Stephanie, and they will defend her. And I'm like, you should know better. Like, do you not see these things that she's doing? And if we explain them to you, how do you justify? Because I know these people and they're good people, and yet they're still supporting Stephanie, and it boggles my mind. And so my hope is that through this podcast, they can hear one more time that this woman is a liar. I mean, she is an evil, manipulative liar. And I have no words. I'm trying to come up with the words, and it is failing me. So
it's like
what else can we
it's
say?
like high school, right? A lot of these so-called activists, they want to be liked. They want to be in the in crowd. I mean, we're talking about protecting children. What's more important, being liked by your state representative who really can't remember your name unless...
But she'll send you a birthday card.
Yeah, whatever. But we're talking about children. If we cannot stop the transition of children, then...
Or protect our elections.
Or protect our elections, what are we even doing? Remember, CPAC has ranked us the 26th most conservative state, and we've had the majority for over 2 decades.
26 out of 50. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about outright lies she's telling about you. Let's start with your military service. Yeah.
So I was medically retired. So I went to basic training in 2003. First 3 years I was in the reserves, and then I transferred to active duty, became a military policeman. I was medically retired in 2015. I needed something to do, so I ended up volunteering for the Dallas County Republican Party for 2 years while I went to college, and became a precinct chair, went to the police academy, and then got a job at Collin County Sheriff's Office as a Texas peace officer, licensed Texas peace officer. And honestly, I had some medical issues that make it very difficult to be in a patrol car for, 8, 10, 12 hours, right? And so I ended up going to the jail. I actually requested my own demotion. She sends out all these texts and everything. David Lowe got demoted without knowing any of the details. And I actually released paperwork today that showed that I requested my own demotion. And so I went to the jail where I was able to put up the inmates if I had to take care of something. And then, I was honorably retired. I have an F5, which shows honorable service from the Collin County Sheriff's Office. So she is so desperate, and she is trying to distract everybody from everything. She wants to talk about everything but her record.
That's a good point. Good point.
Yeah. And I think you used an important word there, desperate. She knows you were only 380 votes
nipping at her
behind
heels
in this primary. So desperation rules here.
But remember, this job pays $700 a month. I don't know why anybody would go to that length to slander somebody so hard for that kind of job. They are spending millions of dollars against me, right? I change diapers and block walk doors during the day, right? I am no threat to them. Although I will say I'm outspoken, right? And I want to hold these people accountable. I don't have any long-term career ambitions in politics.
So it's not your personal goal to make sure women are murdered for
that's something I want to address that real quick.
I want you to
So
address that.
everybody, not everybody, Texas Right to Life and Texas Alliance for Life have repeatedly made the claim that I want to execute women who have an abortion, which is 100% false. The Republican Party platform, Principle 2, talks about natural conception till natural death. Now, the planks go into the platform and talk about equal protection. The same laws that protect you and me should protect an unborn child. If all lives matter, then we should treat everybody the same. And I am being attacked for supporting the Republican Party of Texas platform. What's interesting also is the Republican Party of Texas legislative priority number 6 also calls for that. So obviously Stephanie Click opposes the platform and the priorities.
Okay, and I think we've had Abolish Abortion Texas kind of make the rounds at True Texas Project meetings, and they do an excellent job of explaining that it's not necessarily these women are going to be executed because they aborted their baby, because it's still going to be up to the court, the jury, the judge to dole out the consequences. They're just saying it could be up to and including, but that doesn't mean that's...
They won't even prosecute shoplifters right now.
Right.
You think they're going to... It's about saving babies. And if you want to change the platform, then maybe I'll realign my views. Maybe, probably not. But the point is, I will always support the Republican Party of Texas platform.
Very good. What other lies are out there? Let's get it out on the table.
So the Abolish Abortion Texas folks that come out regularly and volunteer for my campaign, I'm being accused of being part of their group and that they burn down abortion clinics, which is completely false. You know how amazing those people are? They used to go to the clinics and they would say, "Hey, don't go in there and kill your baby. I will adopt your baby. We will find you resources." They are some of the most godly people I have ever met, and they have actually brought me closer to God, and I'm completely thankful. Also, look, let me word this carefully because I don't want it to end up on another TV commercial. So, over 10 years ago, between 10 and 20 years ago, I bought a lot of domain names.
Oh, right. Let's address that.
They were vitamin, multi-level marketing, poker, and so on. And 3 of them sounded inappropriate. Should I have bought them? No. I am absolutely sorry that I bought them. However, let's just keep in mind that was 14 plus years ago.
You bought a whole bucket.
I bought a whole
like it
bucket.
Was all part of a
yes, you're
package.
Right. But the point is, now they're running TV commercials saying that I profited off of the child exploitation, and I don't know how you go from domain name to pedophile, but somehow they make the connection. And their goal is to scare away my voter base. And clearly that's not working. Whether it's polling, talking to voters every day, people are just sick of the ads. And she's not talking about her record. She's not talking why she needs another term. She's only been in there since 2013. So, that's another one. They said that David Lowe doesn't pay his property taxes. Well,
okay, so you're the third candidate now today out of 5
yes.
we've had on here where they have used that same tactic. Oh, he doesn't pay his taxes.
Well,
have they called you a Nazi? Yes.
Remember, Katie is Jewish.
Oh,
so,
that's right.
yeah. So, I'm 100% exempt from property taxes because of my VA disability. However, nobody should be paying property taxes.
Thank you.
And, the appraisal system is garbage. People are getting their appraisals and they're like, what happened to this amazing property tax relief? It's not actually all that great after all. And, so that's another one. I mean, I could go on and on. Interestingly, in 2020, right after she won election, before I ran re-election, she took money from Pfizer. And she then a few days later was appointed to the COVID-19 vaccine allocation panel. And she pushed the COVID vaccines. And then this last session, she actually killed a bill that would have helped pass vaccine mandate or ban. And also in 2020, she took money from AbbVie Corp. You know who AbbVie does? The largest puberty blocker manufacturer. And then she killed the bill that would have stopped puberty blockers.
Do you have all this on a website somewhere?
I can. I'll put it up. But, transparencyusa.org. So she is involved in pay for play with Big Pharma.
Absolutely.
And I can prove everything. The thing is, everybody says, David's a liar. On Texas Legislature Online, you could prove every single thing that I'm saying, right? It's not political banter. It's real, and it's all backed up by
people how to do that.
Yeah. So anyways,
Okay. I mean, I hate to lose this opportunity. Is there anything else we need to mention? Because, man, it is my goal to get that woman out of there. Because I don't know if you know this. She used a photo of my 6-year-old daughter to campaign the very first time she won. And it makes me sick because she's so anti-children. And it's my daughter's photo that she used. And I have to undo that. She has to go. Well,
I just want to point out one thing. If you go to Wayback Machine, it's a website where you can look at old versions of the website. And I pulled up her old website in 2012, where she actually has a statement on there where she will never vote for any more taxes or to grow the government. And she actually just this past session voted to create with all of the Democrats to create a mileage tax.
Yep.
Wow.
So, there's so much, but the truth is I want to run on what we need to do, and that is secure the border, secure our elections, and, get rid of property taxes and improve the system with the Texas House, right? Every vote should be on record. No more voice votes, no more dodging. It is time to hold these people accountable.
Agreed. So have you signed the contract with Texas?
I have actually in August. So the person who actually came up with the idea, and he and I talked about it in August. And I was excited as soon as I heard it because it is time to put people on record.
Absolutely.
The Speaker of the House, he is able to weasel his way out of so many different things. Well, it's time that we only vote for a Speaker of the House that is willing to sign the contract with Texas.
Fantastic. So thank you, by the way, for being here because I really wanted to have this interview with you. So thank you for that. I think it's important to note that we're looking at potentially after these runoffs, 20 to 25 just solid conservatives working together, which is huge for Texas. We're really hoping you're going to be one of them. Let's talk about your district. What is your district?
Okay, so my district is North Richland Hills, Watauga, Haltom City, and a small part of Fort Worth. Okay. And, it's a mixed bag kind of a district, but I love it, and I'm out there every day knocking doors and talking to voters. They're excited about change.
And when is the election?
The election is early voting is May 20th to 24th, and election day is May 28th. I just want to point out one thing. If you live in my district and you have any questions, my number is 817-253-1214. I want you to call me directly and ask me any questions, right? Because the number one thing I hate about politicians is they're like, hey, vote for me, but you can never get a hold of them.
Very good. Love it. That's beautiful. Yes. So we're hoping for good news end of the month. Good luck to you. And Fran, here's to Texas.
And here's to true Texans.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.